You've built a £250,000 pension pot. You've worked for decades to get there. Then a well-meaning friend tells you, take the 25% tax-free cash now. Everyone does it. So you do. That single decision could cost you £40,000 in lost growth and extra tax over the course of your retirement. That £40,000 is just one of 5 mistakes I see UK retirees make, again. Some are obvious. Some are hidden in plain sight, inside advice that sounds completely reasonable until you look at the actual numbers. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to avoid every single one and what to do instead. If you're within 5 years of retirement and you want a playbook that doesn't follow the herd, hit subscribe now. I'll give you the real numbers, not the generic advice. First up, the mistake that feels right but costs the most. If you take the full 25% tax-free lump sum from a £250,000 pension on day one, you pull out £62,500. That money leaves the tax-sheltered wrapper and sits in a bank account earning maybe 3%, and that interest gets taxed at your marginal rate. The remaining £187,500 stays invested. Over 20 years, with the invested portion growing at 5% and the cash growing at around 2% after tax, you've lost roughly £28,000 in compounding alone. And you've also wasted something less obvious, the ability to control your taxable income year by year. That's the trap. The alternative is called a UFPLS, an uncrystallized funds pension lump sum. It sounds complicated, but the principle is simple. Instead of taking all your tax-free cash up front, you take small withdrawals over time. Each one is 25% tax-free and 75% taxable. Because you're drawing in stages, you stay in control of how much taxable income you receive each year. Why does that matter? Because the personal allowance in 2026-27 is £12,570 a year. If you can keep your total income below that threshold, especially in the years before your state pension starts, you pay no income tax at all. Over a 20-year retirement, phasing your withdrawals this way can increase your total tax-free cash by 40% to 60%, compared with taking the full lump sum up front. On a £250,000 pot, that's a difference of £30,000 to £40,000 in your pocket rather than hmrc's. I used to think taking the full 25% was the obvious move. Everyone I knew did it. Then I ran the numbers properly for a client with a £180,000 pot. The difference over their retirement was £34,000. I changed my recommendation that day. Now, phased drawdown isn't always the right answer. If you have a specific large purchase in mind, paying off a mortgage, for example, taking a lump sum might make sense. The point is to make that decision with the numbers in front of you, not because your neighbour did it. There's one more thing worth knowing about state pension timing. The full new state pension in 2026-27 is £12,548.40 a year. That's almost exactly equal to the personal allowance. So once your state pension starts, it fills most of your tax-free threshold on its own. Drawing pension income on top of that pushes you straight into the basic rate band. That's another reason to draw from your pension in the years before state pension starts, while your personal allowance is still wide open. But the lump sum temptation is only the first mistake. The second is even more personal, and the financial industry won't tell you about it. Every financial advisor will tell you to plan for age 100. It sounds prudent, it sounds responsible. And in one narrow sense it is, you don't want to run out of money. But this advice has a side effect that nobody talks about, and it quietly costs people the retirement they actually worked for. ONS data from 2022 to 2024 shows that only around 50% of 65-year-olds will reach 85. Only about 7% will reach 95. So when the industry tells you to plan for 40 years of retirement, it is asking the majority of people to structure their finances around a scenario that most won't live to see. That's not a neutral piece of planning advice. It has a cost. The cost is the first 10 to 15 years of retirement, the go-go years, when you still have the health and energy to travel, spend time with grandchildren, take on new things. If you've overconstrained your spending to protect a pot you might never need to draw down fully, you sacrifice those years. You delay. You hesitate. You tell yourself you'll do it later, and later sometimes doesn't come. I remember my father retired at 62, full of plans. He had a minor stroke at 73 and couldn't travel anymore. He had the money, he just no longer had the health. That stayed with me. The goal isn't to spend recklessly. It's to design a withdrawal plan around a realistic horizon rather than an extreme one, and then stress test it. The ONS data suggests a 30-year planning horizon, so to age 95 for a 65-year-old, covers you well into the 85th percentile of longevity. That's a reasonable worst case, not a median outcome. What changes when you plan to 95 rather than 100? On a £300,000 pot with a PLS, a moderate retirement income target of £31,300 a year for a single person, a 30-year drawdown horizon means you can sustain withdrawals of around £15,000 a year from your pension before needing to draw on other savings. A 40-year horizon forces that number down. The difference might seem small each year, but over the first decade of retirement it adds up to tens of thousands of pounds in experiences and choices you gave up unnecessarily. There's a second force at work here beyond the numbers: loss aversion. People fear running out of money far more than they fear missing out on the life they could have lived. That fear is completely understandable, especially if you've seen a partner or a friend struggle financially in later years. But that same fear, left unchecked, can turn a well-funded retirement into a decade of unnecessary self-denial. Review your withdrawal plan against realistic longevity data, not just the extreme tail. So you've stopped the lump sum mistake and rethought your time horizon. But there's a third mistake that can silently destroy your pot in the first 5 years, and it's not about what you spend. It's about the order the markets decide to crash. In 2008, the FTSE 100 fell 31%. If you had retired in January of that year with a £300,000 pot and started drawing £12,000 a year, by March 2009, your pot would have been down to around £190,000. If you kept drawing at the same rate through the slow recovery, by 2013 you'd have run out completely, even though markets eventually recovered. The long-term average return was fine. The timing was not. This is called sequence of returns risk. It's the danger that a market crash in the first few years of retirement permanently damages your pot, because you're selling units to fund your income at exactly the point when prices are lowest. You lock in the losses. By the time markets recover, the pot is too small to benefit from the rebound. This is why long-term average returns can mislead you when you're drawing down. Someone who retired 5 years later with the same pot, drawing the same income, would have had a completely different outcome, because the crash hit their pot before they started drawing, rather than after. The fix is straightforward, and it costs you very little in terms of long-term growth. You hold 1 to 3 years of essential spending in cash or a low volatility account at the point of retirement. If markets fall sharply in year 1, you draw from that cash buffer instead of selling equities. You wait. When markets recover, you sell some equities to refill the buffer and carry on. Let's put a number on it. If your essential spending is £15,000 a year, a 3-year buffer means holding £45,000 in cash. In a crash year, you draw from that. Your invested pot isn't touched while it's down. By year 3 or 4, in most historical recovery cycles, equity markets have recovered substantially. You refill the buffer and continue. A retiree with a £300,000 pot who holds that £45,000 buffer and faces a 30% crash in year 1 ends up with around £165,000 invested but untouched. With recovery, the pot returns toward £280,000 by year 4. Pot longevity, well beyond 30 years. The same retiree without the buffer, drawing £12,000 a year through the crash, pot depleted within 12 to 15 years. The cash buffer isn't glamorous advice. It doesn't require any sophisticated product or structure, just the discipline to separate your short-term income from your long-term investments before retirement begins. So you've solved the lump sum, the time horizon, and the sequence risk. Now for a mistake that only became fully clear in 2024, and it is going to cost some families a very large sum of money. From the 6th of April 2027, most unused pension funds will be included in the value of your estate for inheritance tax purposes. This is a significant change to a rule that has stood for decades, and many people are still planning as if it hasn't happened. Here is what it means in practice. If you die with £400,000 sitting unused in your pension, and your total estate is above the nil rate band, that pension pot becomes subject to 40% inheritance tax. That's £160,000 gone before your beneficiaries see a penny. But it doesn't stop there. When your beneficiaries draw that money out of the pension, they pay income tax on it as well. Combine the two charges, and the effective rate on inherited pension funds can exceed 60% in many cases, sometimes approaching 70%. So the person who spent years carefully not touching their pension, planning to leave it as a clean inheritance, may be leaving HMRC a very large portion of it instead. I've had clients in their late 60s refuse to spend on themselves, saving carefully, planning to pass on a meaningful sum. When I showed them the post-April 2027 numbers, one said to me, "So I'm starving myself for HMRC." That question changed the conversation entirely. This doesn't mean you should spend recklessly or make panic decisions. It means the logic of hoarding your pension has fundamentally changed. Drawing down your pension in a tax-efficient way during your lifetime, staying within your personal allowance, using phased withdrawals, now serves two purposes. It reduces your tax bill while you're alive, and it reduces the IHT liability you leave behind. Gifting from surplus income is also worth considering. Regular gifts out of income are immediately exempt from inheritance tax, provided they meet HMRC's conditions. They must be regular, from income rather than capital, and not reduce your standard of living. But even if you avoid all four mistakes so far, there's still a fifth one that catches most people, because it's about the order in which you take money from different accounts. Most people in retirement have money in more than one place: a pension, an ISA, maybe a savings account, or a general investment account. The order in which you draw from those pots makes a very large difference to how much tax you pay over your lifetime, and the most common mistake is drawing from the wrong one first. The tax-efficient order for most UK retirees looks like this. In the years before your state pension starts, draw taxable pension income up to your personal allowance of £12,570. You'll pay no income tax on that. Supplement it with phased tax-free cash from UFPLS withdrawals if you need more income. Hold your ISA and let it compound untouched. Once your state pension starts, the picture changes. The full new state pension in 2026-27 is £12,548.40 a year. That's almost your entire personal allowance used up before you've drawn a pound from anywhere else. At that point, any pension income on top of it will be taxed. So switch to ISA withdrawals for your extra income. ISA withdrawals are completely tax-free and don't count toward your personal allowance. They don't push you into a higher tax bracket. They're the cleanest source of income once your pension income is fully taxed. The GIA, your general investment account, sits at the end of the queue. You can use the annual capital gains allowance to take growth out of it tax efficiently, but it's the least sheltered of the three wrappers, so you use it last. A client told me recently, "But my ISA is easier. I don't need to fill out any forms." That's exactly the trap. The easier option costs you thousands. If you draw £10,000 a year from an ISA unnecessarily while your pension income goes untouched, you're allowing that pension to keep growing inside a tax-sheltered wrapper, but you're also building up a larger future tax bill when you do finally draw it, potentially at a higher rate. The ISA is best used later, when your other allowances are full, not first, because it requires the least admin. So there you have it, 5 mistakes, 5 fixes. But if you walk away with just one idea, let it be this. Mistake 1. Don't take the full 25% tax-free lump sum on day 1. Phase it with UFPLS and protect your personal allowance. Mistake 2. Plan for reality, not a 40-year extreme horizon. A 30-year plan is well above average life expectancy and frees up real money for the years you actually have. Mistake 3. Hold a cash buffer of 1 to 3 years essential spending so a market crash in early retirement doesn't force you to sell at the bottom. Mistake 4. Don't hoard your pension for hmrc. The rules change from the 6th of April 2027, and drawing down tax efficiently in your lifetime now beats leaving it untouched. Mistake 5. Draw in the right order. Pension up to your personal allowance first, ISA later. If you're in that 55 to 65 window and you want to make your retirement pounds work harder, hit subscribe. I publish a new rule-based retirement guide every week. No fluff, just numbers that make sense for your life. You've worked hard to build this money. The biggest mistake isn't in the numbers, it's trusting advice that doesn't fit your country, your age, or your tax system. You now have the tools to do better. Use them.